All right, Acts 18. We left off at verse 22. Just before that, we were at verse he was heading towards Jerusalem. Well, that's where he's headed. He's heading towards Jerusalem, and kind of goes through the places that he is stopping to get there on the way. And then we looked at the verses, Acts 9, Galatians 1, Acts 15, showing that he was there. In verse 17 of that chapter, 22:17, I'm sorry, that it's recorded he went at least once actually to the temple. I see. 3 times Acts 9, Galatians 1, Acts 15 show he was in Jerusalem, but in Acts 22:17 actually states he was in the temple. Father, bless our lesson this morning, and that just nourish the saints. Encourage us along the way. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. Well, this evening, I plan to do the journey of the church, and the kind of journey of what we should be expecting. Our journey between being saved and when we arrive. And I believe the Bible does tell that. There's a story, when he took ship, and when Paul took ship, we'll go through there. So we're at verse 22. It says, when he had landed at Cæsarea and gone up and saluted the church, he went down to Antioch. Gone up and went down. So the expression is used a lot. We use the expression going up or going down. We do that a lot. And our main reason for doing it could be different than this reason. If you were to go to Columbus, how would you phrase it? I went down to Columbus. That's logical. I talk to people and they say, well, I went up to Columbus. But I don't do that. I go down to Columbus. I went up. You can't go too far up here at Cleveland. You can't really go too far up. Well, I always say go down. If I'm going to, we're going to be going to, and I do have to make arrangements for preaching. We're going to be gone. We made a spur of the moment vacation. And we will be gone for 1 week. That's the first and second week overlap. And we'll be gone one Sunday. But we're not going up to Florida, we're going down to Florida. It's really not Florida, we're going to Georgia. We're not going to Mr. Hyde's Island, we're going to Dr. Jekyll's Island. So there's Jekyll Island. Has anybody ever hear that? You've heard of that? I have never heard it. Just as long as it wasn't Mr. Hyde's Island.
That was a meeting place for the elite.
Really?
Jekyll Island.
Jekyll Island. Okay, well that's where we're going. And the wife is willing to fly. For the wife to fly.
Her arms aren't strong enough.
Oh, that's terrible. So anyway, we say go up or go down. And what do you say if you're I wonder what the Aussies say. What do they say? The down under people.
They're out back.
They're out back? Oh, we're going out back? Oh, that's terrible. No, but if they're coming up here, I say it coming up. Now, what could this mean? Going up and going down. Because with Jerusalem, they say no matter which way you're going. It doesn't matter which way you're going. So why is that? One is the direction, and the other reason is, what's the other reason? Pardon?
Elevation.
It's elevation. is Jerusalem must be on a higher elevation. I didn't check out those things. It's more, it's higher. It's a higher elevation. When I have heard the earth is smoother than a cue ball. I've heard that. I don't know if that's true or not. On the east side, where's a high elevation? East side of Cleveland. Anybody know? For you snow removal people, where is that? Oh, up there. If you go up to Mayfield and you're traveling Richmond Road South, because I do that, and man, you get to a certain point, you can really see a long way. And that's why the snow gets dumped. It's like rain, it gets dumped. And Bedford gets more rain than other places. There's got to be it's not like a mountain.
No.
It's not like a mountain. Another place is Twinsburg. When you're on Twinsburg, there's a certain place between Twinsburg and Ravenna it dumps. If you live in Colorado, it dumps either right after the mountains or just before the mountains. Denver gets either less snow or more snow. There's reasons for that elevation. But the idea here is going up and going down. Gone up and went down is most likely because of elevation. So probably one of these examples are the parable of the Good Samaritan. It says there was a man, he went down from Jerusalem. He went down. Now why would it say he went down? Elevation. Give me another reason why the guy goes down. He gets pounded on. It makes for good preaching. He went down. If you're going to get saved, you got to admit you're a sinner. Going down, and you're going down. It just shows his sin. He went down. So you could preach it a variety of different ways. So this expression is used. All right. So look at and that expression, Luke 10. Well, let's first go to Luke Acts 11. Acts 11. Now, you guys that snowplow, don't you find it true that you have to send more people up towards Beechwood more often? I'm asking because I don't know. I'm not the one on these crews. Is it Beechwood more often?
It's my area, yeah.
That's your area? and you go up there more often, and you probably need more salt there, and you need more personnel. If it's west side, is there anything on the west side? That tends to flatten out there, folks. After the river, it becomes more buffalo country.
Other than Brecksville, Broadview Heights, Seven Hills, that area gets more.
Which is like right in the middle to just near west side, or
Yeah.
just on the west side.
The highest point in the county is in Broadview Heights. So.
Yeah, I've been down there. There is a place, and I think, isn't it marked that way?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a sign, I've seen that sign.
And the highest point in Summit County is about 3 miles down the road from the highest point in Cuyahoga. There's a good sign on 176.
Okay, in that area. But that's a little further south than Cleveland.
Yeah, Richfield Township.
Oh, it's in Richfield. Okay. You guys got any accounts out there, or no? And then do you have a place out there where it tends to be more, you have to send crews out? Or no? I don't know, I'm just asking. Or what difference does it make? 11:2. And when Peter was come up to Jerusalem, that's how it reads. He came up to Jerusalem, Acts 15. Acts 15:2. They should go up. It says they went up to Jerusalem. Went up to Jerusalem. Acts 21:12. Acts 21:12. They went up to Jerusalem. 21:15. Went up to Jerusalem. 24:11. 24:11. They went up to Jerusalem. Acts 25:9. 25:9. 25:9. when they went up to Jerusalem. Luke 10. Luke 10, this is the parable. Should be the parable of the Good Samaritan. Luke 10:30. Luke 10:30. He went down from Jerusalem. See, when you exit Jerusalem, you're going down. When you're going to Jerusalem, you're going up. It's strictly an elevation thing. How do these old timers, how do they know the topography or the elevation? How's that determined? Well, how did they do it 200 years ago? Because they knew. I don't know. I'm not a civil engineer, so I don't know. There is a way to do that. I mean, they show these topography maps, and they show the lines, how legally they go around these hills. And they're able to make very accurate maps. I don't know how that's doing. And a lot has to, the barometric pressure, it doesn't have something to do with making of candy.
Yeah.
It's something to do with the solidification of sugar or something in the making of candy. Not the kind of candy maybe hard candy.
They can also affect baking.
And baking?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, look at a box of Duncan Hines. There's instructions for over 5,000, or, high elevation.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, it has something to do with elevation and barometric
Yeah.
pressure.
At least the cake mixes used to have that. I don't know, maybe they changed it.
Well, my father loved hard candy. And he told me about this, that the pressure is very important in the making of candy, of how that candy is going to be made.
It changes the boiling point.
Oh, it changes the boiling point of water? Really? Okay, being majoring in that, you must have...
Oh, yeah.
So if it goes up or down just a little bit, it does make a difference? Okay.
That's why your radiator cap increases the pressure in the system to raise the boiling point of water. So you don't overheat.
All right. That's our science. Okay. But it is a fact. It's amazing to me, these people, 100 years, they figured all that out.
Mm-hmm.
They figured it out. All right, his journey to Jerusalem. Back, if you would, to Acts 18. How he gets there. He goes to Cæsarea in verse 22. Gone up, and through the church, he went down to Antioch. So this has got to be an elevation thing. Down to Antioch. And then the country of Galatia and Phrygia and Macedonia and Achaia in chapter 19, verse 21. So those things are is the journey in which he got there, and it does describe that. Now the reason for the shaving of his head, he does shave his head, and did it say he had a vow? Short his head? Yeah, he had a vow. Who in the Old Testament would have done that? A Nazarite. What did I say? How did I put it last week or something? I said it wrong. Okay, that's a putt, and you typed it right.
No, I'm reading both ways.
Oh, both ways. Yeah. Well, see, a year ago, I couldn't spell salesman. Now, I are one. See how correct my grammar? Now I are one. So, yeah, so it's both ways. It was both ways. All right. So he shaves his head. I think last week I gave you a sermon that Dr. Ruckman gave once on Samson. He did 4 individuals in the Bible, and I never forgot the one on Samson. Is that God gets what he demands in the law. God's not going to be shortchanged. How did God get? He's not going to be shortchanged what we owe him. And how does God get that? Of what we owe him. Christ's sacrifice on the cross, man. God got what he demanded. And so Jesus died for our sins. Right? Now, how did he get it out of Samson? All that he was supposed to do. In the end, somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was while we were teaching it or after that, he demanded he had to bring a ram. So who's the ram is, the ram in the story, then it's not Jesus. Who becomes the ram? And God gets what he demands. Who was the ram in the story of Samson? Samson himself. So Samson paid with his own life. He gets his wife, he gets his father-in-law, and that would represent the kid that they were to bring. I think a she-goat and a kid, something like that. And the other was he was to shave his head. And then Delilah makes him sleep, and then somebody else comes in and cuts off the locks of hair. And so God gets what he demands. So now, is this the vow of a Nazarite? We don't know. We don't know. Or what is the one that you said is right? Nazarene or Nazarite?
In the Old Testament, it's Nazarite.
A Nazarene. And what did I say?
Nazarene.
A Nazarene.
Which normally means you're from Nazareth.
And you're not a Nazarite. Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, from what I read, I don't know, I might be wrong, but it seemed to me that Nazareth at the time Jesus was born was like Las Vegas. It was like a wild, crazy
A wild place.
And yet the Nazarene, that area must have started the Nazarene vows. So I'm just wondering how that changed over with a period of time, maybe 100 years, 1,000 years, I don't know, whatever the Jews were there. But it seemed like it went from one to the other.
One extreme to the other. Yeah, I don't know what the culture was. Well, Jonah, he saves with the preaching Nineveh, and then 100 years later, Nineveh goes down to, I forget which book, later on, 100 years later, in one of the minor prophets, Nineveh gets it. And which means they didn't change at all. They repented, but it was temporary. All right, so the reason for Paul shaving his head is he renewed his burden for his people. Now, the burden for his people, and you could say, well, how do you judge his motive? Is there really a way to truly judge a man's motive? Yes or no? No. You can't judge a man's motive. You can't. You can only go by what they say, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. It's kind of like this. They want to judge. What's his name? The president, Trump. His motive in his texting. Well, you can't judge his motives. That's what it's coming down to. At least a couple months ago, they haven't talked about that lately. But they're now checking into the motives. Well, you can't judge a person's motives. So anyway, he does have a burden with his own mouth in Romans 10, verses 1 through 3. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. They're trying to get there on their own merit or some other way. For they being ignorant of God's righteousness, which is through the blood of Christ, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. All right, so he renews his burden because here in Acts 18, he says, I'm done with you people. I'm going to the Gentiles. But when he makes these passes through here, he's invited in to the synagogue. And, hey, Saul, it's you. And he's invited in with his people. And so he then kind of has this renewed spark. And so that is one assumed reason, because we really don't know his motive, is if we were to guess at a motive, this would be an educated guess, is that he has this renewed a burden for his people. So then he wants to protect his testimony before them and show that, well, you know, I'm a Jew too. And he does, and where would you find that? I became all things to all men, that I might, by all means, save some. Where's that from? No? If I'm wrong, we'll look it up. I think it's 1 Corinthians 9. I think it's 1 Corinthians 9. If we go there, I became all things to all men. Yeah, there it is. Romans 9, verse 22. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I have made all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Look at verse 20. Unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews, and so on. So you try to make inroads. Now, yesterday I met Corey's friend, this Ida. Is it Ida? And I invited her into the house, and she's was the second chair for the Cleveland, all-women Cleveland Orchestra, which is, I think, rated in the top 10 in the world. So I invited her in, and I handed her my violin, and I said, well, but I told her it was way out. It was out a full step flat. It was in tune, but it was all flat. And so she really we didn't discover that till later. And she was trying to play harmonics. And I said, well, that's not, I said, well, the bow needs rosin. It just, I didn't prep it. And I handed her, I said, well, it's not a $30,000 violin, it's a $300 violin. And there is a difference between a $300 violin and a $3,000 violin. And the difference between that and a $30,000. It's a $300 violin. It's probably Czechoslovakian. It's a Stradivarius. They're all Strads. But mine doesn't have 1704 in it or 1711. They're all Strads. So anyway, then we were talking about music, and I was on the piano with her. This is we're right out of the hymnal. She wants to get together and play out the hymnal with me on the piano and her on the violin, and she wants to do it in church. Now, I didn't shoot it down. I have no idea what faith she is. Pardon?
She's Catholic.
Oh, she's Roman Catholic. I assumed that, but I didn't ask, and then there was so much going on, we didn't go beyond that. But, folks, I wasn't going to just shoot her down right away. I make as many roads as we can to have the opportunity, either then or later, to be able to witness. And so you want to do it. We must protect we have to have a good testimony, but our testimony before men, it needs to be good. Verse 8. Thinking about the chief ruler of the synagogue getting saved, verse 17, the Sosthenes who takes over, he ends up getting saved. And we looked that up last week in the very first verse. I think it's 1 Corinthians 1:1. Oh, and here it is, 1 Corinthians 9:20. It is, to the Jew I became as a Jew. All right, he's not cutting short his testimony as far as the blood of Jesus, and only that saves. He's not saying, he's not cutting that short. But he's showing that he's I'm a Jew too, so that he has the opportunity in which to save, to win somebody. And the idea is Paul's testimony, it brought him to the point in verses 20 and 21 that his people invite him, let's see here. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not. Bade them, for I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I return again unto you. Verse 20. They wanted him to stay longer with them. I'm just trying to find it. Tarried after them yet a while. take leave of his brethren. These aren't brethren, these are not Christians. But he himself entered into, here it is, verse 19. I'm sorry, it's verse 19. He came to Ephesus and left them there, but he himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not. I don't know why I didn't have 19 in there. Verse 19, he goes to the synagogue. He has this testimony. They desire that he stays longer, and he consents not. So, and he doesn't win any of them. All right, just because there is a joke about that they do with Samson. There is a joke about Samson, Moses, and John the Baptist. Samson, not that I don't agree with the joke about becoming all things to all men. If John the Baptist is preaching this is at a bar. If John the Baptist is preaching at the bar, where is he preaching from? And what's he saying? He's outside the bar saying, burn, baby, burn. I can't remember what Moses says. But where's Samson? He's in the bar. Now, I don't agree with it. That's a joke. That's a preacher's joke, and they tell it in the church that Samson's in the bar, trying to win over and partaking in the sin. And I forget where Moses is at. And I don't necessarily agree with that joke, but the idea is that Paul is in amongst them, and he's doing his best to win them. And we need to do this, and that is pray according to the will. Look at verse 21. This is a good verse to support praying according to the will of God. But bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you, if God will. That's a good verse for praying according to God's will. Who is the guy? He was here. He went over to the Avalon Church. He went over to your guys' church, over to Broadview. Heather is the wife. He lives right up the street, or lived right up the street. We helped him move in.
Ron.
Oh, Ron Fields. Now, when he would pray that, that was part of his prayer. Whenever he prayed, at our prayer service or whenever, he would pray that really regularly. If you will, Lord, if you will. He would include that in his prayer. And there's nothing wrong with that. Paul did that. James chapter 4. So including that in a prayer is not wrong. Paul and I'm not saying verse 21 is a prayer. That's not a prayer. But he does state, according to, if God will. That is important. Verses 15 through 17. For what ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings, all such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. But notice what it says in that verse 15. If the Lord will. That's very, very important, that the Lord wills this. Okay? Verse 22 is the end of Paul's second missionary journey. He went down to Antioch. Now, when we included those other verses in Acts 19, that was getting from Antioch back then to Jerusalem, going to Jerusalem. But the end of the second missionary journey does occur in verse 21 when he went down to Antioch. That's the starting point, Antioch. Excuse me, I got a frog. Verse 23. After he had spent some time there, he departed and went over all the country of Galatia and Phrygia in order, everything done decently and in order, strengthening all the disciples. And so, at this point, listen, we are we as Americans, and I wouldn't say just as Americans, maybe these people too, they're regimented into a daily routine. Usually you go to school, you graduate from college, you get a job, you end up getting married, you have kids, you get regimented. You get up, you got your coffee, you go to work. After you have your lunch. From lunch, you go home, you get your dinner. You know, Friday you collected your paycheck. We're just so regimented. And then when you hit 66, things could change. Now, it's not going to change necessarily for you, but it's eventually going to change. And so you're not so regimented. So why could Paul do this? He's one advantage, there is a big advantage to that. Self-employed. Now, the joke with being self-employed is, well, what do you do in your spare time? The joke is, and I was in 8th grade when this was brought up to me, and we had what was called court. The teacher taught English, history, and Harmon didn't have that. But we had what was called court. They taught English, history, and something else. Yeah, it could have been social studies. And I remember the teacher, maybe it was 9th grade, because that was still junior high. 9th grade, and she said, who here is, got a father who's self-employed? I raised my hand. I think I was the only one in there. And she had asked the question, it's a rhetorical question. I never came up with the right answers. And she asked a rhetorical question. Well, what is it? Tell me, what does he do in his spare time? Well, I said, well, I guess whatever he wants. I didn't have the right answer. She said no. And so what's the right answer? She said, there is none. He doesn't have any spare time. Right, which is he works. He doesn't have any spare time. So anytime there was any money, that money went always back into the business to keep everything afloat and so on. Now, if you're Donald Trump or those kind of people, I don't know what kind of spare time they have, but some of these guys, they work from 6 in the morning till 11 at night, non-stop, phones and whatever. Now, it wasn't quite like that. But Paul has time. You know, his time is for the Lord, but he went here, he went there, he's strengthening the brethren, where you don't have the option to do that. If you're retired, you may have more of an option to do, but we have our own realm to do. But this is what Paul's life was. And it wasn't so necessarily regiment. And then we could regiment the church, and I don't know how good that is either, regimenting the church. And Paul wasn't under that regiment. Otherwise, he would never have been sent out. He never would have come back. He would never have gone here or there. It wasn't so regimented. And there is, and here's 3 R's. A time for rest. Who here doesn't need a rest? A time for rest, a time for reporting. This is what went on with the missionary. He came back and made a report. And then he revisited those where he made these contacts. And so there is time for that. It's either when you have too many things to do, the general saying is, well, then you've done them all. Of all the things that got done, what got done right? When you have too much to do. Nothing got done right. All right? So if you take on a few items and you get more done right than wrong, and so on. But it depends on the person. A lot depends on the person too. But there needs to be a time for rest. There needs to be a time for reporting. There needs to be a time for revisiting. That isn't your life. That's Paul's life as an evangelist. All right? I know the complaint from Dr. Strachan was 100 years ago when the missionary went away. When did they finally come home? 100 years ago.
Never.
He didn't. Well, no, he did come home. In a casket. He may have come home every 20 years in a casket, or he got buried over it, or never came home. And the complaint is, when do the missionaries come home now? Every 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, but they're home, and it's pretty costly to fly like that. I don't know where they get their tickets unless people use a plane fare, somebody else's plane fare that they logged up on a credit card or something. Something like that. But they're home a lot for a lot of R&R and so on. Our missionary that was in Mexico, I can't think of where he was, and we really liked him, man. And it's just too bad. He's a little older. He's 67 or 68, and his health was bad. His complaint, he was hopeful they'd all quit. All the missionaries would quit. Where were the missionaries?
At the resort.
No, he said they were in town, in their apartment, on their computers, and instead of being out in the field, they were out in the bush, and they were amongst the people, and really doing work. And they were more successful, but that's where they were at. And he wanted the younger missionaries who were on their computers to please. Preacher, please. There is a title of the book. I forget who writes it, but Preacher, please quit. Father, bless now the preaching in Christ's name, amen. There's some cupcakes out there for our birthday people in the bag. All right? So, Preacher and move on.